When will the world run out of oil? It sounds like a simple question. We use billions of barrels of oil every year. Oil takes millions of years to form, so eventually the tank has to hit empty, right? But that may be the wrong way to think about it, because the world probably will not run out of oil all at once. It will run out of easy oil first, and that is a very different kind of problem. People imagine oil like a gas tank. Once it empties, it's gone. But global oil works differently. There is oil underground, oil that is too expensive to access, oil in risky places, and oil that only becomes worth extracting at higher prices. So the question is not just how much is left, it's also how hard is it to get. That changes the entire story because oil reserves are not a simple countdown clock. There is oil that exists underground, oil we have already discovered, oil we know how to extract with today's technology, and oil that actually makes financial sense to produce. Those categories overlap, but they are not the same thing. A barrel of oil trapped in a shallow field in Texas is very different from a barrel of oil under deep ocean water, in the Arctic, in a conflict zone, or locked inside rock that requires expensive drilling and hydraulic fracturing. Technically, both might exist, but economically, politically, and environmentally, they are completely different resources. This is why the phrase running out of oil can be misleading. When oil prices rise, more oil becomes worth it to companies producing. Companies can justify drilling in harder places, using more expensive equipment, and taking on more risk. When prices fall, some of that oil becomes uneconomic to them again. It may still exist underground, but it is no longer worth the cost of getting it out. So the world is not just measuring oil, it is constantly repricing oil. A better question is not simply whether we are running out, but what kind of oil we are running out of. Cheap oil, easy oil, politically stable oil, or oil that can be extracted without destroying landscapes, leaking methane, flaring gas, and locking the world deeper into fossil fuel dependence. Because those are very different questions, this is where the real tension begins. The real oil crisis starts long before the last barrel is pumped. It starts when the oil that remains becomes harder to reach, more expensive to produce, more damaging to extract, or more vulnerable to geopolitics. You do not need to run out of oil to feel an oil shock. You just need a war near a major supply route, sanctions on a major producer, underinvestment in supply, a refinery outage, a sudden rebound in demand, or a shipping disruption that makes markets panic. And when oil markets panic, the effects move through almost everything. Gas prices rise, airplanes pay more for jet fuel, shipping costs climb, farmers pay more for diesel and fertilizer inputs, plastic production gets more expensive, food prices can move higher because oil is connected to transportation, packaging, agriculture, and global trade. That is why oil is not just an energy story. It is an inflation story, a food story, a transportation story, a national security story, and still an environmental story. Because the harder oil gets to access, the more complicated its footprint can become. Deep water drilling requires massive offshore infrastructure. Oil sands can disturb huge landscapes and require energy-intensive processing. Some oil and gas systems leak methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Gas flaring wastes fuel while adding pollution. And every barrel that is burned still adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So when we talk about oil scarcity, we should not only be asking whether we can find more, we should also be asking what it costs to keep finding more, not just in dollars, but in stability, health, ecosystems, and climate. For most of the last century, oil became the foundation of modern mobility. Cars, trucks, planes, ships, militaries, supply chains, plastics, chemicals, roads, suburbs, and global trade all grew around the assumption that liquid fuels would be abundant and affordable. Oil is incredibly useful. It is energy dense, easy to transport, and embedded into thousands of products and systems. That is exactly why it is so hard to replace. But something important is happening. The world may begin reducing its need for oil at massive scale before it ever physically runs out. Electric vehicles are already replacing gasoline demands in parts of road transportation. Better batteries are improving range and cost. Public transit, e-bikes, walkable cities, and efficiency standards can reduce how much fuel people need to move around. Renewables are expanding across power grids, while heat pumps, electrification, and cleaner industrial processes are starting to shift parts of the economy away from combustion. This does not mean oil disappears overnight. It means oil's role can start to shrink where better alternatives exist, and that distinction matters. The goal is not to pretend oil is useless. The goal is to stop depending on it for things where we now have cleaner, more resilient options. Still, the transition will not be simple. Oil will continue to matter in sectors that are harder to electrify. Aviation still depends heavily on liquid fuels. Long-distance shipping is difficult to replace quickly. Petrochemicals use oil and gas as raw materials for plastics, solvents, synthetic materials, and countless industrial products. Heavy industry may need new fuels, new chemistry, and new infrastructure before it can fully move away from fossil inputs. So the future is not as simple as oil ends and clean energy begins. For a long time, the world will be doing both at once, using oil where it is still difficult to replace while trying to reduce oil dependence everywhere else. That is the real challenge. If we wait until oil is physically gone, we have already waited too long. The smarter path is to build a world that is less exposed to oil shocks before the easy oil becomes harder to rely on. That means cleaner transportation, more efficient cities, stronger electric grids, more renewable power, better batteries, lower methane leakage, less wasteful flaring, and a serious effort to replace oil in the places where replacement is actually possible. This is not just about climate, it's about resilience. A society that needs less oil is less vulnerable to price spikes, supply disruptions, refinery bottlenecks, and conflicts thousands of miles away. It is also better positioned to cut pollution, protect ecosystems, and build energy systems that do not depend on constantly chasing harder barrels in riskier places. So, are we running out of oil? Not in the simple way people imagine. The last barrel is probably not the main problem. The real issue is that the barrels left behind may become more expensive, more politically complicated, and more environmentally costly to produce. The question is not just how much oil is left. It is how much of that oil is still cheap, accessible, and worth the cost of getting it. And that changes the future we should be preparing for, because the future will not be defined by the exact moment oil disappears. It will be defined by how intelligently we respond while it is still here. We may not run out of oil, but we can run out of reasons to depend on it.